Okay. So hi, Nolan. Welcome to the Creative Operations Podcast by Artwork Flow. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here and I'm looking forward to this conversation. My name is Nolan McCoy. I'm the head of video and creative content at a company called Chilipiper. We're a B2B scheduling, routing, and conversion platform for revenue teams.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about, how your journey so far has been from being a hands-on creative in photo, video, and audio creation to becoming the head of video and creative content at Chilipiper, and what does the job entail? Like, what does it entail to be the head of content at such a innovative company, especially in the B2B space?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my journey into the role where I find myself now was from really a traditional video background. I went to film school. I was originally self-taught and just kind of started as a hobby. And then, as photography equipment started to lend itself to video, I found myself also creating videos and found that I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed storytelling and communicating emotion and making people feel something. And so I decided to go to school for it. And after school, I just kind of was like, am I either going to be a wedding videographer or am I going to be a filmmaker? It's kind of like, seems like the two paths, at least to make money with video. And then I found myself, I kind of fell into marketing. I'm sure a lot of other marketers can relate to that. I found myself filling a video need at a B2B tech company who had, a marketing team that needed video and needed hands-on filming and editing and content creation. And that was really my crash course into marketing. And then since then, I've gone from company to company that needed to leverage video and needed to activate video as a marketing arm. And so almost 3 years ago, I found myself in the same position coming into Chilipiper. Let's activate video. Let's get brand awareness. Let's build credibility in our space. And I guess the rest is history. So my job now today looks a lot, more than video. I'm obviously doing videos. I'm overseeing, contractors that are helping us with video. And then I also produce and edit our branded podcast, which is targeted at demand gen personas, and it's called Demand Gen Chat. And we've been running that for a little over 2 years. And then I also just help out with other creative things that don't fit, I guess, in a traditional, is this content marketing? Is this design? Is it just random acts of creativity, I guess? And then I also oversee our social media.
Interesting. So Nolan, B2B especially, right? It's considered not a very sexy space for marketers compared to, say, something like a B2C. But Chilipiper is one of those companies that has always, experimented with, different formats, putting video on the forefront. So what do you have to say about that? Like, where do you think that business metric comes in when it comes to creating impact through really like quality and thought-provoking creatives, especially in the context of B2B?
Yeah. So I don't know if a lot of people will like my answer when it comes to how do you like measure the impact of kind of creative content in your brand, because most of the time you can't, and that is okay. I think it's okay because what you're doing is, if you're measuring things like impressions and engagement rates and, retention rates on videos, if you're measuring, I guess, eyeball consumption, then eventually that you'll find that hopefully converting into business. And it's hard to attribute that. One way that we tackle that is when you take a demo of Chilipiper, there's a required empty text field on our demo form that says, how did you hear about us? And that allows us to get any response because we're in so many different places and doing so many different things. If we have a drop down with like 5 different social, search, this, and we only limit to like 5 things, we do a lot more than just 5, marketing motions in other places. So we like to leave that empty, and oftentimes you will see YouTube, LinkedIn, you'll see, I saw your, we filmed something together in an event or things like that. So it's kind of an investment into the unknown, but because you're reaching eyeballs and you're getting impressions and engagements on your content, people are remembering it if it's different enough. And if you're, breaking the status quo a little bit. So it's more, I like to think of it more as like, how can we stop the scroll, disrupt pattern interruptions, and make people think different. And eventually that will convert down the road.
That's very interesting thought. So basically what you're saying is that, someone is scrolling on LinkedIn, for example, like what kind of content do you push out there that makes them stop the scrolling thing, and then somehow create that mind space for the brand in that person's mind?
Yeah. So one example that it's not a video, it's not a thought leadership post, and it's not even like a GIF. Well, it was a GIF, but something that's not normal, I guess, to see in the timeline is we took a screenshot of a LinkedIn post and we photoshopped it in a way that it looked like, if you have, a rectangle, and if you broke it in half and it looks like two posts. Okay. But what we were doing is we were actually just putting half of a fake post in this image, and I wrote on a piece of paper, double your inbound conversion rates to Chilipiper, and I stuck one of our stickers to this piece of paper. It looks like a 5-year-old drew it, like I don't have the best handwriting. And then I literally just set my phone up on my desk, got a blank wall, and I just filmed my hands coming up with this piece of paper. And then I cut that out in After Effects and did a whole bunch of stuff to it and overlaid it on top of this timeline. And so you're scrolling, and it looks like you're scrolling past this, it was a screenshot of a different post we had made way back. And so it had all these likes and stuff. Then all of a sudden this piece of paper is coming up. As soon as you interact, the start of it, it comes up, and this piece of paper comes up and covers all the content. So you're like starting to read this nice post that got a lot of, wow, it's got a lot of likes, and all of a sudden this comes up and interrupts your scroll. And that was so successful. We ran it as an ad, and it became our most highest converting ad of all time because it stopped the scroll. It broke what are we used to seeing? How can we do that differently in a way that makes people say, hey, that's kind of cool. If they're doing this differently, they probably are doing things differently with their product too.
Yeah, and that's important, I guess, in a industry like sales and marketing, because there are already so many products out there, and you can do differentiation at a product level, but the customer really experiences, the first touch point is always like the marketing and the creatives. So how can you differentiate at that moment when you do have that very little moment of time to get someone's mind space? That's very interesting.
Exactly.
Great. So what does your cross collaboration with other teams look like? Like you're the creative director, you lead the video, and so how does a typical brief looks like, and where does it come from? Does it come from the management, or is it more from the sales team? And how do you get some of those, like how do you get your hands on those consumer insights and try and produce the best content that you can for the company?
Yeah, I would break it maybe 50-50. Half of it would be internal requests coming in, and then the other half would be looking for opportunities to create content to support that motion. So for the first one, it's pretty simple, I guess. We have like an Asana board, and I have a request link, and I have a form that you have to fill out. And anybody in the company can fill this out, and they have to fill out this very detailed request. It requires a brief that I made a template of, and it needs these details, and then they can submit that. And then by the time I'm getting it, I've already basically had a kickoff meeting with the information that I've read. So it's very efficient. I don't need to have a meeting about a meeting. And then we can jump right into actually moving forward with the content. And so really, in a way, it's almost like an internal agency where inbound requests are coming. The sales team needs help making this 10-minute demo video, or demand gen needs help making this little, ad to run and test, or content marketing might need this little GIF for something else. And then the other half, like I mentioned before, would be, we're in meetings looking at our next quarter, and we're looking at, what are our big kind of marketing motions, and how can we like to think in ways like, how can we break the internet with this idea, which is a lofty goal. Breaking the internet's a big goal, but it kind of helps reshape, is this a break the internet idea, or is this just a cool idea? Because oftentimes in brainstorming, we all get very attached to our own ideas. We're like, I thought of this, I feel like it's cool, therefore I love it, and I'm not going to let go of it, and I'm holding tight to it. But, if you kind of create this culture of creative feedback and nobody's getting offended, there's no ego in it, then we all kind of ask, like, can this break the internet? I don't know if it can. I think it's cool because we think it's cool, but will they think it's cool? And that's the most, that's a different topic, right? But there isn't like a set like brief, or there's not like a certain process, because every content piece has to be different. There's no template. Obviously you build a model and it's like, okay, when we record a podcast episode, all of these dependencies kick off. But when it comes to creating net new content, there isn't a copy paste. There isn't anything like that.
Right. How many times have you broken the internet?
That would probably be a subjective, answer. I can say that as of yesterday, we had a LinkedIn account that appears to be Snoop Dogg, like one of our posts on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's breaking the internet, but like, I don't know how Snoop Dogg found our content. Cool. But that post that he liked, or someone liked, that appears to be Snoop Dogg, that post didn't do very well. Okay. And that's often like very, like the post itself wasn't like this viral post, but a good marketer can capture that moment and actually spin it into something. So what we did is we screenshotted Snoop Dogg liked it, put a big orange circle on it, and made a post with all these Snoop Dogg puns and B2B, and we said, B2B now has the D-O-double-G and like all this stuff, and made this thing. And that post now has like 10,000 impressions and all these reposts and all these comments, and now our brand awareness and perception is like, Snoop Dogg's liking Chilipiper content, I should probably follow Chilipiper and like hang around Chilipiper. So it's, again, back to there's no template. It's like, let's see how we can continue to, again, it's not about Snoop Dogg liking this post that did okay. It's about the moment and how it, relates back to our brand, which we want to be cool and different. And I think Snoop Dogg's cool and different. So it's also complimentary.
Definitely. You can.
But to say how many times we've broken the internet, I don't know. It's up in the air.
Yeah. Interesting. And how is the response on the podcast? I mean, we're doing this, and I'm curious as to, how does it look like when you're 35 episodes in? Like, what kind of impact did it generate for your community? Did you get some really good response in terms of, people actually listening and learning? And what was it like?
Yeah. So we relaunched the podcast in 2021. Originally, it had just been like, let's get on Zoom and record for 40 minutes and publish that on YouTube. And that was the original podcast. And then the person that was hosting left the company, and it kind of just settled down and didn't do anything. So when I came in 2021, I said, I have podcasting experience. And like, well, we really want to restart this podcast. And so I worked with our head of demand gen at the time, and we kind of reimagined what could this podcast be. We worked on strategy and angles and narratives. And I don't know how many episodes we publish, but it's hard with podcasts because you want like millions of listeners, right? Because you're like, the TAM of podcasting is huge, but the actual total relevant market of podcasting in B2B, which is a niche, in a topic of B2B is a niche, and then like your POV of a topic of a thing in B2B is a niche of a niche of a niche. And so it's always hard when you're presenting numbers to leadership with podcast metrics, because like, let's say 2021, we only got like 18,000 downloads across maybe 30 episodes or something like that, right? And so that's like, you look at that and you're like, wow, this other LinkedIn post, we can get 20,000 views on one post. But you have to think about the difference of a podcast. And I like to share this perspective a lot, is podcast is, I think, one of the most intimate pieces of content you can ship as a brand. And that's because I'm wearing these earbuds right now, and I can go out and I can go anywhere, and I can have somebody talking directly into my head and like feeding me information, right? As if I'm hanging out with them. I can hear their intonation. I can hear how they're passionate about something. I can hear things that don't come across in maybe a content article and can be consumed in ways more conveniently than a video or an article. And so it's this interesting intersection of like intimate, like hanging out with this person and learning from them and almost absorbing them as if you're having like a coffee chat. And so those 18,000 people, I would consider them more qualified listeners or audience members than 100,000 impressions on LinkedIn. Because we know LinkedIn is a social platform and it's pushing out to a lot of people. Obviously, it wants to go to a relevant audience.
Yeah.
But I still think that a smaller and we've seen, to answer your question, I guess, roundabout ways, on that self-reported attribution form, we see a lot of times, I love your podcast, I've listened to your podcast, heard your podcast, and it's not like, in my opinion, I don't feel like we're doing, obviously you always feel like you can do better, right? Yeah. But what we're seeing is it's resonating. And that's the point. If you have a podcast with 1,000 listeners in a whole season, and it resonated with 50% of those people and they all become buying customers, that's 500 new customers, right? And so it really does just come down to how good is your content? How good is it resonating? How much is it making them feel something that makes them nod their head and go, yes, I believe what you're saying, and therefore I would like to buy from you when the time is right because I trust you. And that's at the end of the day what matters, but we get so caught up in vanity metrics with podcasting. It's so hard.
Yeah, we've just started this, and we do hope, and why we started this. So we interviewed a bunch of people in the creative ops space for a few of our content pieces, and a lot of them mentioned that there isn't a lot of content out there for this as an industry. There are case studies, there are some ebooks, but they did mention that a lot of learning that happens for them happens over podcasts. Like they listen to design podcasts, and even I do that. Like when I'm in a metro, or if I'm driving my car, I just put on some informational piece of content, and I get a lot of ideas from there as well. Which is why we also started this podcast, and it's been really interesting, at least for me, to host and get a bunch of different guests.
Yeah, and to your point, like, even the Apple Watch that you're wearing right now has the ability to download podcasts to it.
Absolutely.
And you can pair AirPods to it.
Yeah.
Like, what other device allows you to there's no other content piece that you can consume on your Apple Watch. Like, talk about something that's always with you. It's just a perspective shift. And I think if you think about that potential of being along with your audience, it also helps you create that more authentic content, because you're not thinking in terms of like, build it and they will come. It's more of build it for 5 people now, and that will organically grow as word of mouth, as things progress down the line. And it's true, there isn't a lot of content for the creative space in B2B, because traditionally it is like old school creative director agency content, which is there's amazing agencies making amazing content, but when we're thinking about like B2B startups, creative ops, marketing, creative, like it is a different lens than just creative.
Absolutely. And that's why, we're building this, and hopefully we'll get somewhere with it. Brings me to my next question. And you also did mention Asana. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, how do you project manage this entire production piece? You mentioned Asana. How do you manage your team? How do you collaborate? Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we're a fully remote company. We don't even have a centralized office or home base. Everybody is around the globe. And so we really use 3 different tools to collaborate. We use Asana, we use Slack, and we use Google Suite. So, we're using Google Docs to, write things, and we're Slacking in different channels to collaborate. And then we're using Asana to kind of organize as a center of truth for where things are. When I'm collaborating with freelancers, I like to set up Slack Connect channels, so that they're actually in the org. Obviously, they're not added to every channel that exists, which would be probably not, probably IT's not going to be happy about that. So having them in like their own Slack Connect kind of area, and then I can add them to DM groups with relevant people to work on projects. And then similarly, we will actually pay for an Asana seat for our most reoccurring freelancers as well, so that they're in our process and they can comment and add things, just because it's just worth it time-wise. Like if I'm trying to be a middleman project managing, like, can my freelancer send me an email or a Slack, and then I need to update that in Asana, and that you extrapolate that over project over project over month, like what's my time worth, right? At the end of the day, one or two Asana seats is not going to break the bank. And so then practically in Asana, I just have one board. It's titled video. I've never changed the name, but it's really just any project I'm working on. And that's where those inbound requests go from that Asana form that I mentioned. And then I have it broken out in a Kanban style, but I've just titled each column of the Kanban request, pre-production, in production, post-production, approval, complete, and stuck. And then I can pull those projects through those different stages. Pre-production and post-production, that's kind of coming from the video background a little bit, but it does, it can apply to obviously podcasting and other things. So obviously those requests go in the request queue. Pre-prod is like the planning, the brief, the brainstorming, all that. In production would be, we're making things, we're filming things, we're drafting things, making mock-ups. Post-production would be that polishing process. Approval would be, obviously you're getting approval. Complete is self-explanatory, and then stuck is kind of that, like, we started it kind of didn't make it through production, or it kind of stalled because we changed directions, but I don't want to delete this. I kind of want to just keep it in my little back pocket drawer as like, maybe I can pull from this later on. And then I have Asana automation set up across all of those, so that when a task is dragged into any one of those, it updates a status and says this thing's in pre-prod, or it updates the tag that goes with the column it's in. And similarly, if I change that drop down status change, if I change it, it'll automatically move it over to that relevant, just to help, because again, what's my time worth? And if I'm like spending time like updating the status or the tags or all this stuff, like I can just do it by literally dragging to a new column.
Yeah, that's interesting because even we use like some of the, so most of our apps talk to each other, and then Slack. I love Slack Connect. Like you can literally bring all of your contract workers, all freelancers on one channel, and you don't have to like go look into emails or just keep opening your WhatsApp. So I absolutely love that feature about Slack. Do you also do all of your approvals as well on Asana itself, like just getting comments on videos from people, or just making changes? How is that?
Yeah, so we did use Frame.io for a while, because that just is a part of Adobe. We did use that for a bit, but it almost was a little bit too official for like some of the content we're using, just because like that's built for like a lot of like, I don't know, it was an unnecessary step for our process. But if we were building out like a major media arm thing, I would totally start doing it again. The other tool I didn't mention that's really been helpful for our collaboration for multimedia content production is a tool you're probably familiar with called Descript. And that is Descript, yep. And it's a linear or non-linear editor similar to Premiere Pro or something like that, but the differentiator is that it transcribes all your content. And so then you can edit your content by editing a Word doc. So if you want to delete the paragraph that I just said previously, you go and you highlight that text, hit your delete key, and those clips snap together, and you have the before that and you have the after of what I said. You can remove filler words and all this kind of stuff. It also allows the ability to comment. So if a lot of editing is already happening in Descript, then the marketing team has seats and they can come in and comment and collaborate there. So that's kind of where that redundancy of Frame.io kind of like went away, because I find myself editing a lot more in Descript than I do Premiere and Adobe now, just because it's all in the cloud, everything's saved automatically. I can just send a link, they can open it on their end, and the whole transcription-based editing is really intuitive for people who don't have a film or video or background, because just Adobe Premiere can be very daunting. And if I send you a Premiere file, you can't just open it. You need all the source files, you need all things. For Descript, I can just send you a link and you'd be working with files straight out of the cloud.
Got it. Any AI tools or upcoming technologies that you've piloted, and what's your thought on that?
Yeah, so we use Opus Clip for doing our social clips on the podcast or long form thought leadership. And then we also use a tool called Decipher. It's spelled DECIPHR. And we put our long form content in that as well. It just helps us with like YouTube chapters and starting to like write written content out of long form. So if you wanted to write a thought leadership article out of our conversation, you can pop it in Decipher. It would start, but it would make a title based on what we talked about. So it would probably say it would probably summarize something of like why creative ops matters in B2B and how to differentiate your brand or something like that, right? It would summarize a lot of what we've talked about, and then it would write like an article with maybe like 3 or 4 sections with headings and everything and quotes. It would quote you, it would quote me, and like as if, again, what's your time worth? I mean, to write, and then we can take that and like build upon it and make it sound less like AI. But those are 2 like of the really core AI tools. Descript, like I mentioned, has a bunch of AI tools as well. They have things like eye contact. So if you're reading a script off a screen, it'll make your eyes look like you're up here.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. Or like you can do like an AI green screen, or there's some sound improvement toggles in there too. And so those are kind of the 3 like AI tools right now that we're happy with.
So I think we're already like 26 minutes, I think, over time. And because it was really interesting to chat with you, but I have this one, last question before we move to the fun section, which is, what's your most favorite project so far? Like, I know from this conversation that you're a very creative person, doesn't have to be viral, but something that's been really close to your heart.
I mean, recently what's top of mind is we just were at different conferences. We're at Inbound conference in, HubSpot Inbound. We were at SaaStr and Dreamforce, kind of the September conference conversion that happens every year. And we had this idea, I had seen a while ago, this in person, someone had taken a stencil and they put it on a sidewalk and they pressure washed it. And so this, whatever the design of the stencil was, it cleaned the sidewalk. So it actually took dirt off of the sidewalk and put like a thing that you can't wash off on the sidewalk. But it's like, so it's kind of like graffiti, but it's actually called reverse graffiti because you're cleaning instead of making it dirty. And it's like, how is cleaning the street illegal? You know what I mean? So it's kind of this like gray area. So I'd seen this in person and it was really, really impacting me. Like, that's really cool. And so then we were trying to think of ways to just activate at these events. And like, again, be top of mind, have brand awareness. And so the idea started there, but having a remote team source pressure washing people in local cities it's a little logistical with the timeline we were working with. It was like, we like this idea, we believe in this idea, but to pull off this idea, we may need to pivot. And so then as a team, we pivoted, and I was actually out on leave at the time, and the team was able to pivot to doing like chalk, but we watered down the chalk. So we're actually painting chalk onto the sidewalk in the stencil. And that was still, obviously it would wash away when it rained, but it's like, how's it illegal to put sidewalk chalk on sidewalk? It's called sidewalk chalk. So it's a gray area, but we had these stencils. And so in Boston, we leaned into like the Boston accent. And so we made a stencil that was like wicked smart scheduling. And that was kind of like our thing that we wrote out for Chilipiper. So it said wicked smart scheduling, and it had our logo and it had Chilipiper. And we just put that literally on the street across from the event center. So people waiting to cross the street to go to the event would see that, and then they'd go in and see our booth eventually and, make that connection. And then in Dreamforce, I think we did like, because California is known for having droughts, we had one that said stop the revenue drought, and then Chilipiper, and put our logo. And then I think at SaaStr we said something about like clean up your inbound flow. And that's kind of like, well, we made the sidewalk dirty, so like clean up your inbound flow with Chilipiper. So that's like something where it's like, it's not video, it's not a podcast, it's not an article, and it's not measurable by any means. The only measure really is like how many social impressions can this get, or like how many, the hope would be that people post about it. And like something I've noticed is like a lot of people appreciate the effort behind a marketing motion rather than the motion itself. And so sometimes it goes back to like the Snoop Dogg thing. It's like, it wasn't the post itself that was the thing, it was the action around it. And so often it's like, oftentimes brands get celebrated for buying a billboard, and they get more attention on the social post about the billboard they bought than the billboard will get. You know what I mean? So kind of leans into that a little bit of just like, people will appreciate this effort and it's different, so it stops the scroll and people, are excited about it.
Yeah, on that point, I had a story. Like, so one of our viral or most viewed post
Mm-hmm.
ever has been this. So we are into one of our modules is asset management, right? And it's AI
Mm-hmm.
powered. So you can think of like Google Photos for enterprises. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
there was a burger, and that burger had all the tags that are associated with burger. So it had literally nothing
Mm-hmm.
to do with damn, but just the fact that there is a burger picture on LinkedIn, that I guess got us, a lot of views. So, like, you're very right and so that brings us to a whole circle on how content needs to really cut the monotony and
Mm-hmm.
have that brand, which is what your camp at Inbound also did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah, you just don't always know what's gonna work, and that's
Yeah.
why we like to more lean into like, let's go a little bit more quality over or quantity over quality, because if we get too caught up in quality, then we don't ship as much and we can't test as much and we can't see what resonates.
Yeah.
And so if we go so quality and we're planning so far out in the future that we might miss marketable moments along the way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this brings us to our fun section, which is the quick rapid fire section. So Nolan, what's your favorite film of all times? A movie, basically.
Oh boy. I would say the recent new favorite would be the Top Gun movie that came out.
That was a wonderful
last
movie.
year.
Totally loved it.
I would say it's just like it just checks every single box of what makes a good movie. It's just like, I don't know, it's in some way it's like how movies used to be made, but it's new and there was all these cool filming techniques and but the story, it's just like you can't not put it on and just it's a good underdog winning story.
It's a lovely movie. Like, I've watched it 3 times. I just love the angles and the production and cinematography in the film. It's absolutely wonderful. So, between writing, cinematography, editing, what do you think is your favorite, course?
None of them.
Is it
my favorite is storytelling. Storytelling, yeah.
That's the answer I was expecting, so it was a trick question.
Yep, because if any of those, if you go down any of those paths and you don't start with storytelling, then you just have noise, you just have content, and you end up making random acts of content rather than, actually content that makes someone feel something. Because story is the vehicle that makes us relate, it makes us connect, it makes us understand. And if we don't have story, then we don't have substance. And so it's junk food content rather than nourishing, healthy content.
Absolutely. So, Nolan, that brings us to the end of the podcast. And thank you so much for taking out the time. I learned a lot from this. I am definitely going to share some of these learnings within my team and have them watch this as well. But yeah, thank you for taking out the time and good luck to you for everything that you're doing at Chilipiper.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me on. It's great. Great time. Great talk. Great podcast.
Superb.